even the younger ones, we want to believe that just Alzheimer's and dementia is just in older people. And yes, it is predominantly them. But I'm going to tell you, the youngest one that I've met with Alzheimer's has been 30. Has been 30 years old, and no one would listen to him, and he kept saying, please check me, because my mother had it, my grandmother had it, check me, and no doctor would listen to him. He really had to fight for that. So now he's 38, and when you get diagnosed and it's younger, early onset, it moves faster. And so they decline really quick. I've got several that go with me to Congress, and one family, he was a Air Force veteran, retired at 49. He died at 52. So I'm just saying that don't just check it off that just because they're old, or if you're older, you get those symptoms. Recently, I don't know if any of you saw this on 60 Minutes, they have found a village outside of Medellin, Colombia. And that village, they have traced a family for 100 years. Everyone in the family has it. For 100 years, because they've tried to say, oh, it's our diet here in America, we eat processed food. Those people do not eat processed food. This is to let you know this is bigger than what we think it is. Currently in the United States, there are 5.4 million people with Alzheimer's or dementia. 5.4. And so the chances of you sitting next to someone that maybe in their early stage, they keep repeating themselves, telling you that same story in Sabbath school. They're not doing it to be mean, and you want, oh, be quiet. They're letting us know there's something happening. I'm like her. I can see, if you talk to me, I can see it in your eyes. That's just the truth. Once you've lived with it, my mother also got diagnosed in 2010. I can spot it a mile off. If I'm in the grocery store and someone's fumbling with their change, I know what it is instantly. I don't want to, I just can't help myself now.
Science has finally caught up with one of our favorite prophetic writers in our church. And there's a unique connection between the body and the mind. It's one person anyway.
That's right.
And many times we separate when the person has dementia, they have Alzheimer's, they have an anger problem, but you are what you eat. And research has found that people with dementia and Alzheimer's, one of the things that happens is the myelin in the brain begins to erode. And the myelin is the same as cholesterol. So when doctors say your cholesterol is high, yeah, they might be telling the truth halfway. But cholesterol is the same as the light in your car that tells you the seatbelt needs to put on. If you cut the wires because the sound is annoying, then you lose the alarm. And they have shown that people who have taken an added increase of eggs and they get the cholesterol, their memories begin to come back and their myelin begin to regrow. So there is a connection. But what I've also discovered, I look around and I'm not condemning Decatur Church. Your senior pastor is my schoolmate. But in all of our churches, when these programs are announced, people find time to visit Pastor Pillow and Sister Sheets and Cathedral de Mattress and other things to do, because they're either afraid to deal with the issues or they think, well, this can't happen to me. In his book, As a Man Thinketh, James Allen said, people are anxious to, let me not misquote it, people are anxious to improve their circumstances, but are unwilling to improve themselves. They therefore remain bound. So when the pastor makes an appeal and the sermon really gets you and you come to the front and you cry, you boo-hoo, snap your nose, all that kind of stuff, if your mind is not on changing yourself, but just your surroundings or circumstance, you will remain bound. And in the church, we have a lot of people who are demon-possessed, people who are stare crazy, people, I think getting Dr. Ruff to talk about Proverbs 29:18. My people perish for lack of knowledge. And if you really do research on that text, it doesn't say that the person dies, It's worse. They live. And one famous speaker said, Most people die at 25, but are buried at 65. And so God says, I have come to give life and give it more abundantly. Most of us just survive. We don't live. So we don't want to change ourselves. We want to change our circumstances, what we do, but not me. I'm okay. Well, I'm here to tell you, you're okay, and you'll remain that way until you die.
Oh, I guess it's my turn. What do I see? I see a lot of denial, is what I see. Pretty much what everybody said. But I see denial. We don't recognize in the church mental illness. It's not recognized. People want to push people outside of the church off into a corner. I have worked in various juvenile centers, residential treatment centers, prisons, the whole nine. And people just get herded around like cattle. In the church, people want to pray away the mental illness. Do I believe prayer works? Yes, I do. Faith without works is dead. You got to do something other than just pray. And some people are stuck on that. And so you in denial, and then they say, this person must have led a horrible life. The devil is attacking him and blah, 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 blah. But nobody's taking into consideration trauma. They're not taking into consideration this person's background. Was this person physically abused, mentally abused, emotionally abused? All these different things play a part in our mental health, what we talked about earlier. And so we have all of these grown folks walking around that are broken.
That's right.
And guess what? Nobody ever, in the black community for years, we never went to see psychiatrists or psychologists because that was crazy folks go to see them. White folks go to see them, you don't see them. Ain't nothing wrong with that boy. He just need a belt on his butt. Gee, what is that called? ADHD. But it wasn't then, you know, it was like, just beat him. And you're beating him and you don't understand why he can't go to class and sit down. So then you give him speed to slow him down, which is Ritalin. See, it goes very deep when you start talking about psychotropic meds and all of this stuff, all of that. But there's a lot of denial in what is going on, and we don't recognize it. Take, for instance, a few years ago, remember the young lady that everyone was looking for, Talika Patrick? Mm-hmm. Okay, Talika Patrick. I don't know if anybody, was in here that's related to her, knows the family or whatever. I don't know, okay? When that whole situation happened, okay, she was working on, she had a MD and a PhD. I just did one, and I know how, you're like, here I could pull it out. It's very taxing. You're submitting stuff, and they're like, no, go back and go back and go back, and you're like, man, forget it. So I can understand what she went through, but here's the situation with that. When it happened, I had put out online, I was having my morning devotion right before church, and she came to mine, and I had saw the videos, and me being trained in the field, I was like, I think this woman has had a psychotic break, because who prepares food for someone who is not there?
That's right.
And says, this is what it would look like or be like if you were here. Normally, people just tell you what it would be like if you were here. If you were here, I'd be doing this for you, fixing this, doing that. She had pancakes with butter on it, syrup poured, stripples fixed, orange juice poured. Who does that? Somebody has detached with reality. You've set a whole plate up, a whole meal up. When you start going in, and I said this, I said, I am not sure what it is because I have not spoken with this young lady. I said, however, and all of a sudden people started, what do you think it is? What do you think it is? What do you think it is? And I was just like, I'm not going to say, but it was kind of what I said it was, what I thought it was. And what happened was a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but maybe 2 of my colleagues who went to school with me, went to Andrews University. Okay, all right, so, no, he's Oakwood, folks, you know, went to Andrews University.
Watch yourself.
All right.
I went to both. So.
Okay, yeah, okay. So what happened was, and she was at Andrews too. Anyway, what happened was, she, they said, you know, you're saying stuff that you don't know what you're talking about, and you know you shouldn't say it. I'm like, I wouldn't speak on it if I didn't know about it, and I definitely wouldn't put it out there if I didn't know about it. But I just said we need to continue to pray that they find her and da. Well, all of my friends in the mental health field who I didn't know were, you know, on, everybody came on and said, we got over 100 years of mental health experience on this. He knows exactly what he's talking about. He's hitting the nail right on the head. And when they found her, exactly what I said happened.
That's right.
Exactly. And I brought this story up because of this. If people are in denial about what's going on, the search for someone missing is different.
Sure is.
If I'm thinking someone has been abducted, then I may not be checking in the mental health ward in the hospital. You find out what I'm saying? I'm looking for other, you know, strange cars and this or whatever. Not only that, she's a black female. So now our search may not be a huge search. But if folks say, this is what happened in the past. Now here's the thing, to show you how we deny this in the church. When she was found and everybody found out there was a mental health issue, everybody who had her picture up, for the most part on Facebook, took her picture down.
They sure did.
Took her picture down.
They sure did.
I don't know if anybody else caught that, but I'm trained to look and watch all of that. And I'm like, wow, when everybody thought she was abducted, everybody was looking and pray and pray and pray. And then when she was found, the pictures just started to just come down because nobody wants to be associated with mental health. And I'm like, I'm kind of like you. I'm always in therapy mode. When people are talking to me, I try to turn it off, and people will tell me on the phone, like, are you diagnosing me? I'm like, I'm not trying to, but there's some stuff you're saying that's kind of, you know. Well, here's one thing. Tell everybody, oh, she's crazy. There is no diagnosis, folks, called crazy. There is no diagnosis called crazy. I just want people to know that, because people will automatically, you know, think he's crazy. But that's what I see. Amongst everything else, the largest thing in the black community is denial. Now, especially in the church, black folks have just recently started to, you know, I used to work at, I'm not sure you guys may be familiar with Hillside Hospital residential treatment, you know, specialty hospitals, you got Laurel Heights and you got Twin Cedars, things like that, residential treatment center. I dealt with kids, you know, from adolescents to teenagers. The kids in this hospital, I met one, and we talk about trauma. All of what we started realizing is they had a unit that they had to turn into basically the sex offender unit. Because every kid coming in had been sexually abused and was grooming other kids. I would get the kids, it was like a what do you call it? A farm league. You know, you're like, oh, let's get them ready, and when they get older, we're gonna sit them down here. I got one kid on my unit that came to me, and when he came in, I read his psychosocial. Before I got off the first page, he had been abused by 8 people, sexually abused by 8 people. The mother, the mother's boyfriend, the mother's boyfriend's son, some of his relatives, and some of the people in the neighborhood. That was just on the first page. And if you ever seen a psychosocial, it's pretty thick. That was just the first page. And so what we had to realize was like, wait a minute, you know, we got other guys that we're thinking are not involved in this behavior, but they are. So we had to change up everything. So we talk about denial, we talk about people's history that folks don't know. That's another thing that black folks do. We keep history, quiet. Like all my aunts and uncles and grandfolks that's going on to glory, I'm sure they got some secrets that would blow my mind, because you did not talk about your business like people do now. And everybody puts stuff out there. If you look at these videos, we had these young girls are having kids, and they're doing all kind of crazy stuff in front of the kids. When I was coming up, hey, kids be seen, not heard. We never involved ourselves in grown folks' conversation. I didn't even want to be in the room. I was like, oh, old people in there. You want to go play. Now they just sitting right up under you. And they know everything. You talk about diet, that's also important. Okay, it's also important. Hey, everybody's trying to get off of this and get off of that and get on this and get on to that. Really, what is healthy? Nobody knows, because they can tell you that, oh, this stuff is grown over here and so, and then what you find out is, wait a minute, so let's get this straight. Our eggs are hatched, our chickens are here, we're sending them over to China, which has no, is it the FDA, no regulations. So they could be, in their bathroom cutting up chickens, at their home, put them back on the thing and send them right back to America, and you frying them up because you think that what? Anything in the grease that's 360 degrees, we killing it anyway. I'm just saying, you never know. Oh, this stuff was grown over here. This was grass fed. How do you know that? Were you there with that cow from birth to all the way up till they killed him? Nobody knows that. So they just put this stuff on and tell you that, and we're, ooh, the girl, this healthy child, is good. And then here it is, you find out, like, what happened to so-and-so? You can trace all of this stuff back. There's nothing that has been, that we take that hasn't been, how can I say this? There are GMOs pretty much like in almost everything, almost in everything. You got to look at what you eat. Like, my wife will bring home plastic. I can't stand eating with plastic forks and spoons. I'm like, I need something real in my, I can't take that. But the stuff that they do, and just all of that stuff, everything we breathe in, we look at, whatever. It's all of this stuff has an effect on us. They had there was a study done years ago. And I'm sorry, but when I get on this topic, I can't help myself, because I've been wanting to do this for a long time. And when the Talika Patrick thing went down, I had actually formed a consortium of people that were coming together to go around from church to church to talk about domestic violence. I mean, not domestic violence, to talk about mental illness. Our church will deny mental illness. They'll deny domestic violence. They'll deny, that our kids are, having sex, whatever. All of that stuff gets denied. And just because you deny it does not mean that it's not happening.
That's right.
And because we don't address it, everybody's mouth drops when like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened, because you had no programming for it.
That's right.
MV, I'm from the MV era. Doesn't exist anymore. AY doesn't exist anymore. None of that stuff. You go home and like, all right, well, what are we gonna do now? Oh, I guess we'll see y'all next week. When I was growing up, MV had programs that taught us about sex, that taught us about contraception, that taught us about STDs back then, which are STIs now. We talked about all that. I'm gonna get off the mic, but this is passionate to me. And when I see stuff like this, I'm glad that this is being put on, and is a nice crowd here. But this should feel like we were having church, because people need to know this. And we have people in our church, like I'm sure every church does, that has mental health folks, and you see them every week. Right. And everybody just say, hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm all right, I'm holding it together, I'm holding it together, and you're like, yeah, okay, And there's a lot of things, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna be done. There's a lot of things that we had that we don't get help for. Show of hands, maybe just me. How many people grew up in a single parent home? Okay, single parent home, just a few people. Did you ever get any help for that? Any counseling? Any grief and loss? None of that. I grew up, Dad lived across town. All of my friends in this neighborhood, no dad. Every now and then you see some boyfriends coming over. Maybe Dad did come over and visit. But all of us grew up in that neighborhood. Some are dead, some are on drugs, some, are doing okay. But you never got help for. Tell me, how does it feel without your dad being there for birthdays and Christmases and holidays and things like that? Tell me, how does it feel when you go to play sports and Dad doesn't show up and Dad didn't teach you how to throw a spiral or shoot a jump shot or run? You follow what I'm saying? And we just keep on moving through life, and all you hear is, black folks are strong, they strong. Yeah, that might be true, but we broken in inside. And we've never sat down and laid down and say, tell me how that makes you feel not growing up without. A lot of things I do now, I know it's because I didn't have a dad in the house. Yeah, my mother was strong. She kept us in church, thought Ellen White was an aunt or something, It's just, but we just move on with our lives. But anyway, I'm done because they're giving me the high sign. I'm sorry I took up the time, but okay. Y'all asked, I told you.
You did.
They gave you the mic.
Okay. Thank you so much. We've heard from all of you now, right? Just about? Okay, we're going to break out into sessions, and Ms. Louise is going to help us to see which areas we go to, where we can ask more directed questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see so many faces here. So at this time, we're going to have a brief breakout. And what we're going to do is we're going to have children 8 to 16. Any of you that have children 8 to 16? Up to 16, okay? You are, I got to put my glasses on, I can't see. Okay, I want those who are 8 to 16, up to 16, to go with Miss Joanne Farmer Young. And Miss Young, I want you to take them to the mother's room. Do you know where that is? It's set up. I set it up. Okay.
Somebody have to show me.
Okay, okay. If someone in the back there will take her to the mother's room. Okay, this young man right here in the brown will take you. Okay. Yes, right now. So all the children, 8 and up to 16, follow this lady. Okay, for everyone else, all the adults, we're going to stay right here, okay? You can come closer if you like, and we would really like for you to come closer because this is the participatory section of our program. This is where you get to ask questions on some of the issues that you may have or some information that you want to get from our panelists. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Elder Frederick if you would put this mic right here so that people can come up and ask you questions. Just before we do that, I'm going to ask Tita if you'll do your post-traumatic stress.
Oh, sure.
Right now.
Okay.
Okay? And when she's done, then just come on up and ask your questions.
Is there somebody that can flip the slides?
Yes.
Dave. Are you ready in the booth upstairs, Josiah?
Okay.
Presentation. He has your name up there.
Okay, while they're getting that together, let me ask, by a show of hands, how many people have ever heard the phrase, the word, the acronym PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder? Okay. How many people know someone who has been diagnosed with PTSD, or you have a suspicion that they might be dealing with PTSD? Okay, not very many people. Okay, so who would be likely persons that would be susceptible to post-traumatic stress disorder? Someone who's experienced a trauma. So that could be, what immediately comes to mind might be your military personnel who have gone into combat situations? What about your emergency personnel, like your firefighters, your police officers, your first responders? But what is post-traumatic stress disorder? It's the development of characteristic symptoms following exposure to one or more traumatic events. We all remember September 11th, right? Okay. We likely remember where we were and what we were doing when we saw what was happening with those planes, right? Flying into the buildings. Okay, so even if you were not in one of the towers, one of the twin towers, if you were walking along the sidewalk as the first airplane hit the building rubble falls and flies everywhere, you're immediately in shock. Okay, so you experienced, by witnessing this hugely traumatic event, right? You saw this thing happening. You knew that it was tragic. You knew there were casualties immediately. Nobody had to tell you because you saw what happened. How many of us think that it would be appropriate for that person on the street who was not in the buildings to actually get some help, some type of mental health counseling for what they saw, what they felt, maybe what they heard? Did they hear people crying out to be saved? What do you think that does to a person's emotional state, to their mind, to their psyche, to feel, oh my gosh, I was this close witnessing this hugely traumatic experience? Now, 9/11 was I think it would be indisputable to say that it was hugely traumatic, right? Everybody agrees that that was a traumatic experience. But there are other traumas that happen. We like to call things big T, little t. So that may have been, a big T kind of trauma. You have a little trauma, a little t trauma, that you may not even be aware is considered traumatic. I can't tell you how many times I've sat with a person in my office describing neglect as a child, and describing it so matter-of-factly, like it happens in every household. And then when I, in turn, respond by saying, oh gosh, that was hugely traumatic. How did you get through that? They look at me as if I'm crazy. Like, traumatic? Doesn't everybody go through that? So what happens is we grow up, we engage with others, we live our lives through the lenses of that trauma that we don't even know was trauma. We find jobs, we go to work, we have trouble interacting with colleagues, we have trouble being supervised by a certain gender, maybe, based on a traumatic experience we may have had. How many people get to 45 years old and has never gone to speak with a mental health professional? I think one of the panelists talked about the stigma of it all. Black people don't go to counseling. Black people don't go to psychiatrists or psychologists. In my experience, that has been absolutely true, but I'm so happy to say we are slowly but surely coming out of that stigma, and people are actually reaching out for help, thank goodness. Because every day that we live, we're living our lives through the lens of our experiences, right? So if we have these traumatic experiences, it could present itself as anxiety, excessive worry. Why am I always worried about, if I'm going to have food today, or if I'm going to lose my house tomorrow? If, in fact, that's not actually a realistic fear for some. For some people, you have a very stable job, you have money in the bank, so that shouldn't necessarily be a fear, right? But it may very well be. Do a little backpedaling and digging, and you find that this person could have a whole lot of trauma in their past. Some people get misdiagnosed. I've seen this in my experience. A person comes in, they have anger issues. It's a lot easier to see anger. sometimes. So that means, you know, if it sounds like a horse, you know, it's probably a horse. So it's probably some anger issues. But with a little bit of digging, you might find that really and truly that anger is truly a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. I had the privilege and honor of working with a Vietnam veteran for approximately 3.5 years in counseling. This was his first experience in receiving or even seeking out mental health care. He had been self-medicating with drugs and alcohol for many, many years. He had lots of the symptoms, hypervigilance. You know, he would check the doors and the alarm and the windows to ensure everything was locked all the time. He always felt like he was at the ready. He couldn't relax. Even his adult children would say, "Dad, we're in the backyard having a barbecue. Just, it's okay. You know, we're fine. Everything is okay." But what was his focus on? That little squirrel that's ruffling the bushes over there. It's like, okay, it might be taking him back to the jungles of Vietnam, right? You would think that after 40 years, gosh, he wouldn't still be so hypervigilant. But why wouldn't he be? Did he go and seek out assistance before now? Was it made available to him before now? Was it less stigmatizing to do so before now? You have to understand, trauma can occur at any point with anybody. It doesn't necessarily have to rise to the level of a 9/11 type of tragedy. There could be all forms of assault that can happen within a home, within a family. Sometimes, you know, a young child is sexually assaulted. How do you know this without them telling you, without you bearing witness to the assault yourself? Their behavior may change. They may not be able to tell you X, Y, and Z happened to me, or happens to me every time Uncle Bob comes over. Well, pay attention to those behaviors. Does the child shy away? Do they shy away from crowds, from large groups of people? Do they shy away from attention? So in some children, it may look like they become an overachiever. So you may have three children. One of them is being abused. That one child is an overachiever, always getting A's in school. You never get a bad phone call or report from the school. While the other two children, they're being children. They make mistakes. They're talking in class. They're getting poor reports. But why does that one child seem different? Could it be that they don't want to invite that extra attention? So I'm going to be perfect, so mommy and daddy don't have to ask me about anything. So they won't have to think that something is going on with me. But this child grows up and lives his or her life through the lens of that trauma, of that assault. They make decisions, they make judgments unknowingly through the lens of their experiences. Post-traumatic stress disorder is prevalent. It's everywhere almost. Hopefully, if you know someone dealing with issues related to post-traumatic stress, you would encourage them to seek out help, because they're not crazy. Think about it. If you were in Vietnam, wouldn't you need to be hypervigilant? Wouldn't you need to suspect that an overturned leaf could mean that it's hiding a bomb? Wouldn't you need to have that always ready kind of adrenaline focused, you know, always paying attention to detail? But when you come home, you're no longer in that war zone. However, it's not as easy for people to turn that switch off. So now they're safe at home. They can actually see their surroundings and they're safe at home. However, it goes a little bit deeper. They need some assistance. Some people experience nightmares that cause anxiety and insomnia. There's medication that can help with nightmares. It can help lessen the frequency. It can help lessen the intensity so that people can sleep. Why is sleep so important? It's a factor of everything. Okay, thank you. So you want to be you want to be a good support system for others. If you suspect someone is dealing with trauma, dealing with anxiety, you want to offer your support, lend your ear, encourage them to seek out professional help. It doesn't have to be stigmatizing anymore. It doesn't have to be, oh, you know, black people don't do this, because we do. Not only do we seek out counseling, we become counselors to help people just like us. So consider, you know, when something just isn't right, something just seems awry, something seems bizarre, talk to people. You don't have to shy away from people. There might be a reasonable explanation for that bizarre behavior.
Are there any questions? There, you just come to the mic, pose your question concerning what was just spoken about.
Good evening. I would like to address my question to Dr. Parks. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Park, you mentioned, you spoke on diet and food. What I'd like to know is, I buy a lot of organic food. I try to buy as much as possible. Do you think that even though it's labeled organic, do you think it's really organic?
I'm not an expert, but I did sleep at a Holiday Inn last night. No, no, I was at home. I'm not sure. I think a lot of, it depends maybe where you purchase it. There are codes that they put on different foods to let you know if it's organic or if it's, regular or whatever. So you got to familiarize yourself with those scanned, barcodes that they put on the food. Places like Sprouts, maybe, Trader Joe's, things like that. Even Whole Foods. Some of those, I think it was maybe last year, Whole Foods got busted because they were talking about, that this was organic or something like that, and it was found in China. So, like I said, you never know. You never know what you're getting. It could be something where, I'm sorry? Yeah, unless you grow it in your own, backyard and, have your little farm back there, then you gotta ask yourself where the seeds come from. So,
you know what, speaking of that, my husband and I grow quite a few things in our home ourselves, and what you do is whenever you go to buy a plant to grow, at hybrid, when it says hybrid, they have generated it. Right. When it says heirloom, they are originally from seeds. If any of you have noticed, most of our our watermelons and grapes have become seedless. That is to keep you coming back to the store to purchase. That is not natural. God designed it so that everything should have a seed to regenerate. So I'm just throwing that out there.
And I'm glad you did.
You can go online and look for seed companies that do heirloom seeds, particularly, not hybrids. Have you go to the store and buy a tomato and it tastes like nothing? You know what I mean? We put it ourselves, it doesn't taste like anything. A real homegrown tomato has a taste. That's the difference. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm not a food expert. You can see I like to eat, but that's not the point. The point is, don't do hybrid, do heirloom.
Thank you.
Right. So if you ever see, like she mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned that, because you will see seedless watermelon,
Yep.
seedless grapes,
Yep.
all of that stuff. And I had, I mentioned to my wife, I'm like, why are you buying this? She's like, what? And I'm like, you know this was created in a factory somewhere, right? It doesn't have any seeds in it. How are they getting it? I ain't thinking about that.
It's convenient.
Because it's convenient because you don't want it to get in the way of your enjoyment of the
your
food.
Experience. That's
Right. And so, you want watermelons with seeds in them. You want grapes with seeds in them. Like she said, it's.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the organic barcode. I always check that. But then my daughter had said, well, you don't know if it's organic or not, even though it says organic. I did buy a bell pepper last week, and when I cut it, it didn't have any seeds. So I threw it out because I knew it had to be tampered with.
Wow.
Good for you. And that's a major indicator. You know, if you cut open something and you're like, okay, did this just evolve? How did this get here? You know, if it doesn't have any seeds in it, more than likely it's created in a lab somewhere.
Thank you.
Years ago, there was a seminar done at Oakwood College, and it concerned about those seeds and seedless things. And so what it was about is that lots of nurseries are actually patenting now those seeds, and you have to come to them. So they have actually taken what God naturally did, and it's a whole economic situation about it. And so for you to get something with a seed, you have to go to them to buy the seed so that you can grow it yourself. Otherwise, everything would be seedless. And so they have the pattern on that. And there's specific nurseries around the world, especially in China. They have done that a whole lot, and Africa.
Well, one, if you grow them yourself, once you have cut open the tomato, dry out your own seeds. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but my husband has like a can of things that he has kept the original seeds from, and they actually work from there. So that's what you do. Once you start your own garden, and you don't need a big house, you don't need a big yard, you can do it in pots, but if you're concerned that that affects your mental health, grow your own tomatoes. I'm just saying.
She just said, I have a question. Because I get this a lot, and I hear this a lot in our churches, that mental illness is only related to demon possession, and we want to say that mental illness is just demon possession. I've seen articles that dispute that say that there is a difference between demon possession and schizophrenia. And one of the answers that I saw was, if the person you think has demon possession and they take medication and the symptoms and the crisis goes away, then it wasn't demon possession. Terry and I don't know where the young pastor went, and Pastor Rayburn and Pastor Whitaker, can you guys speak to the difference between demon possession and schizophrenia? Because I think a lot of our church members are confused, and they'll say that a person is demon possessed when they actually have schizophrenia, and explain what schizophrenia is and symptoms and all of that.
I've talked enough. I'm going to pass the mic. Maybe I'll join in later. Give somebody else a chance.
Maybe you can come back to that question.
Pastor Rayburn?
I think there are many things you could be demon possessed with. But a lot of times we use that as a blanket statement, somebody who is mentally ill. And like you said, you know, you should be able to differentiate, because yes, there could be a measure of demon possession that caused the person to arrive there. Most diseases we bring upon ourselves, a lot of times. Some come because of family heritage or post-traumatic situations, but there should be a line of demarcation between demon possession and schizophrenia or any other mental disease. And a lot of times, there are people in the church who have done certain things, maybe they've gotten involved in adultery or stealing, whatever it is, and their guilt is, in fact, Carl Jung said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you'll call it fate. So a lot of us are dealing with stuff that are in a subconscious mind that's controlling us, and we are unaware of it. And we say, well, you know, I'm unlucky, or this is how my life is. But you have to sit down, go to a counselor, go to a psychotherapist, and try to unravel some of what happened in your past to see how it may be affecting you unconsciously and coming out in conscious actions.
What is schizophrenia? What are the symptoms?
That's not my area. I see in my lane.
Lucky I keep my trusty notes handy here. So, okay, so schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, brain disorder that affects approximately 2.2 million American adults, or 1.1% of the population. Okay? Excuse me here. I had a feeling somebody was going to ask me about this, which is not my forte, but, you know, I just put my notes in here anyway, okay? It says the first signs of schizophrenia typically emerge in the teenage years or 20s. Okay? Most people with schizophrenia suffer chronically or episodically throughout their lives and are often stigmatized by lack of public understanding about the disease. Schizophrenia is not caused by bad parenting or personal weakness. A person with schizophrenia does not have a split personality, and almost all people with schizophrenia are not dangerous or violent towards others when they are receiving treatment. So for instance, when they have decompensated, meaning maybe they're on their medication, but then they stop taking it, then that's when you will see some of the behaviors come out. There's a movie years ago when I was growing up, it was called Sybil.
Right.
And Sybil suffered from, schizophrenia. So you look at a person who has decompensated, and when you're trying to talk to them and calm them down, or, putting your hands up like that, we would see two hands. A schizophrenic person would see a bunch of hands. And so it looks like everybody's trying to touch them and grab them, or, whatever. If you can download or live stream Sybil or whatever, go and, and check that out. You want me to go on, or? So when we talk about the demon possession piece of it, oh, I'm sorry. Who? Okay. You're doing great. No, church folks will attach everything to demon possession.
Yes, they will.
Everything is attached to demon. Now, if you want to go spiritually, yeah, you can say that. Sin, yeah, all of that. Okay. But when we look beyond that, we start looking at chemical imbalances. We start looking at, different things in the brain where, the neurotransmitters, like in bipolar, the brain is just made up of a bunch of, cells. And what they do is, brain's nerve cells, and what they do is they transport information back and forth to each other, in a constant stream or flow, and they release chemicals which are called neurotransmitters. And what scientists see is that when these are not right, the neurotransmitters are not right, that's where you start seeing mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenia, bipolar being a mood disorder, schizophrenia being a mood disorder, paranoid schizophrenia, all of these, when you start looking at all of these mental disorders, they almost kind of mirror each other, but what you have to look at is the criteria. You have to look at, okay, what are some of the criteria that caused this, that brought this on? How long has it been, happening? That's kind of what separates all of these different mental disorders out. But as far as demon possession, when you look at demon possession, you're thinking something totally different when I think demon possession. I'm thinking like this person is behaving in a way that would kind of make me think like that person got the devil in them, as opposed to this person is having a psychotic break or needs, medication or needs treatment. That's just me.
And the reason why I ask that is because you have people, like children, that are barking and growling or hissing, and the person says, "That child, I told you that child's demon possessed." So so that's why I asked: is there a difference between demon possession and schizophrenia? And because we want to relate everything to sin and that, how does that call into play? And one other question too is, with all of the crime that is happening nowadays in our country, everything is being linked to mental illness. the young man that killed the people in South Carolina, now he's trying to, feign out that, okay, I was mentally ill. Everybody's trying to say that they have mental illness because I see it as a way of escape so they don't have to go to jail. So are people that commit crimes, is there a link to crime with mental illness?
Without, somebody else want to answer that? Or you
Well, the
want
only
me?
thing I want to mention is when people say, oh, that's demon possession, oh, that is mental illness, are they professionals speaking or just folk roaming around the church? I'm not trying to be funny. We need to be mindful. If the pastor says to me that is demon possession, he may have had experience. If this gentleman says to me that person's having a break, they're professionals. We as lay people that may not be trained, we need to be mindful of what we say and what we're calling out.
That's right.
We need to be mindful, and I'm going to share with you, when my mother first got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I got the call to hurry and get to Richmond, Virginia, something was wrong, and me being the nurse had to go through the process with her. There was one of her church members there, I'm not sure, she evidently didn't know me very well. She said to me, you know what, your mother would be fine if you all had faith and knew how to pray. Wrong thing to say to me. Wrong thing to say. Because you don't know, when you make that statement to someone, you are negating anything about them. I know if I said that to you about your dad, you would have been devastated. And if you had come at me, I would have deserved it. Because that's not the thing to say. If you don't know what to say, be quiet and pray for them. Because we step outside, as you said, out of your lane. That's not your area of expertise. But if you're a prayer warrior, pray.
Amen.
But don't call people out. Don't tell them this is their fault. Don't tell them you shouldn't have lived in sin. Don't do that. That's not for you. That's the Holy Spirit's job to do whatever convicting and converting they have to do. And it is the professional's job to do the diagnosing. Stand by them as they get treatment, but don't call families out to say their lack of faith has brought this upon their family.
So I totally agree with what you said there, but just to take it just a step further, I don't think that we should, again, overlook what we're seeing.
Right, I
Because
agree.
there are professionals in our congregation, and then there are families. That person has a family. Speak to someone in their family
Right.
with what you think you see so that at least it can be addressed. And I
Right.
think that's what we're missing in our congregations, is that everybody is hush-hush and wants to act like they don't see what they saw. And, you really have to come with a caring heart. You can't be so judgmental. Not that any of you are, because I don't know any of you,
Right.
but just saying, you have to come with an open heart, because dementia is just running rampant. So, if you don't see it in your family, you may see it in a friend, and eventually you will see it in your family, because that's how aggressively it's just moving across. So I would suggest, if you see something, whether it's a mental illness, schizophrenia, dementia, anything odd, we should be with a caring heart and spirit going to that family to say what we saw, and then maybe if you know a professional, to pull a professional.
I want to piggyback on that. Just like that lady came to me and said that if you pray, there was also a friend of mine that lived in the church, was a member of that church. He said, you need to come here. Something's different with your mom. And I noticed something this Sabbath, and I need you to come. And I did. But that was done with a caring heart. That was done like, I see something and I know her and I love her and I talk to her all the time, and it's just different. And it happened shortly after my father passed. And oftentimes with dementia and Alzheimer's, if they're two together and then one passes away, my father was my mother's covering and she could hide it. He hid it because he was her protector. And as soon as he was gone, it was out there. So that's the difference when you do it with a caring heart. And he did just what she said. He called me as a family member, said, you need to get her, because if you know anybody with Alzheimer's and dementia, they can fake you out for a little while.
Yeah, real quick, I've had in the last few years several friends of mine whose actually mothers diagnosed with early onset dementia. And it was a couple of years ago, I was in Dallas. One of my friends was getting married, and his mom rode in the car with me. I've known her, you know, we used to go over her house and eat and everything when I was in college. And we're driving, and she just started randomly talking about the bridges, the structure, or whatever in the highway. And I'm like, what is going on with her? And the more time I spent with her over that weekend, I said, I think she's suffering from dementia. But I never said anything to the family. So here recently, I've been talking to the daughter and this and that, and I was like, I said, do you think your mom, you know, may be suffering from, you know, early, you know, onset Alzheimer's? Well, you know, she's going to get taken to the neurologist, you know, the neurologist or whatever. And sure enough, it came back and she had it. And I was like, I recognized that several years ago.
Right.
And I guess because, again, being trained and the kids were not, I'm like, but you got to know when something's wrong with your mom. She's not acting the same. Right. And I knew that just from going to school and notice how the conversation was flowing, and she was just out there. She was out there. And I was just like, I felt so bad because she's back in, you know, her state, and, you know, I'm not going to say where she lives, but she's back there, and it's not, you know, it's not doing well, and they got to look at, you know, selling the house and moving and getting her and all of that.
I want to ask you a question. So if I go to the kitchen and I forgot what I went into the bedroom for, is that enough to say there's an early onset? At what point do we, what are some of the signs that family members can cue on to say, I need to look into this?
Well, they're probably more, well, better
One
to
of the
speak
things
at,
is, it's one thing, I go in the room and forget stuff all the time. That's okay, that's just, some of it comes with age.
That is a sign.
But one of the things is usually you can retrace your step. Okay, I came in the house, I put my bag here, I went there. Alzheimer's and dementia, they cannot retrace the natural steps that the rest of us can. That's just the truth, because we can say, I came in the door, put my bag down, I put my shoes there, let me go backwards and redo that. They cannot do that. They can't do that. Okay. And I left, those of you that want to know the exact signs, on the front desk out there from the Alzheimer's Association, I left the top 10 signs to know that it's time to get somebody checked. So get that information on your way out.
Actually, it wasn't a question, it was a response. My name is Sheila Willis, and I'm a clinical social worker as well, and I work for the VA. But I wanted to speak to, agree with, and just piggyback on when we were talking about schizophrenia and mental illness or whatever. It's really like a break in reality, you know, and it's the frequency. Like you say, it could start very early, about 15, 16, at young adult, and then the frequency and the duration starts to get longer and longer, that they are out of touch with reality. But what I really want to say is there's a lot of mental health going on, and she said something about demon possession. What we want to look at is not so much as blaming the victim or blaming the person, because we know that there are some people that are born with certain things, so we don't want to blame them for being, you know, schizophrenia that they had no part in or anything like that. So what we want to do is take all collectively, what you're saying, the lay and the professionals, we all have a part that we can, nobody is like you know, just got an edge over the other. Family can show more, then collaborate with the professionals. Then, you know, you can take a history, and from that history, then you can set up a plan. But when we're looking at it in the church, and that's why I wanted to come out just to see where I'm glad to have this conversation and this dialogue. But when we're looking at it in the church, sin is prevalent in all things. We know that it was the beginning of breakdown from perfection of what God had for us. So when we're looking at counseling, we're looking at different things like that, we need to come from a compassionate standpoint. We also need to come from accepting, like you said, denial, that these things are happening, but we also need to allow to be a part of the solution. Just like some people come to church and expect that they are not to hear children. They are not to hear anything other than what they want. But children exist and children play and children whatever, so that's okay. And the same with mental illness. So if you got somebody walking in your church that walk up and down, accept that that's what they do, love on them and accept them. And if you want to know more, then, you know, look it up and see how can I do more. But what I would just suggest is that we all collectively have a part to play and nobody is over the other.
Question in the back.
I have a question. I have two questions. The first question is, I have a friend who suffers with mental illness, and recently she's had multiple flares and she's lost her job. How do you help a person who has mental illness re-enter the job force? And then my second question is, I work with Pathfinders, and some of my kids are, they move around a lot, they talk a lot, and how do I understand if it's something more than just kids being busy and if there's something else going on? What do I need to look for to determine what those things are?
I'd like to speak to the issue with the kids. I think a lot of times, especially in the black community, the schools, the counselors are quick to label the black boys especially as having ADHD. And a lot of time it's not ADHD, but SUGAR. And they've done the research. Once you cut out because in a lot of our schools, especially the public schools, we have these machines. You know, by the candy, the soda, and the sugar upon sugar upon sugar upon sugar. And in fact, our prophet tells us that when we come to a meeting, like the children's board meeting, don't take any milk and sugar together. It creates alcohol. And a lot of times in the black community, they want to label the boys as being ADHD, give them the speed like the doc spoke about, and they never get better. Diet has a place. So when those kids are overactive like that, take them out in the field, tie a rope around their waist, and let them run around. Get the sugar out of their blood, and you'll see a difference. But I'm being serious now. And a lot of water. We have to start, I think the sis here rightly said, and we know this as Seventh vendors. We need to plant our own foods, go back to Eden. In fact, there's a book called that, by the way. We need to go back to the original diet and living the 8 laws of health, new start. And if you really check it out, every major illness, you can trace where New Start was either there or lack thereof. And it makes a difference. My mother-in-law was just diagnosed with early onset dementia. And I am no big expert like these guys up here, you know. I'm still a work in progress. And I told my wife, baby, you're a nurse. You know, my wife has degrees in nursing. She up to wazoo. She's so smart, much smarter than me. I said, your mom is stressed out. She's home all day. Your father and mom go out. She's just cooking, cleaning, taking care of grandkids. She needs to go out and get some sunlight, get some exercise, talk to somebody, because she is like a Vietnam vet.
That's right.
And she and her sister are nurses, so, you know, I don't have a white jacket, you know, like they do. So they won't listen to me. After a while, I kept pestering them, say, baby, you know, you're right. And we started taking her for walks, started giving her more eggs to eat, a lot of water, relaxation. And my wife can tell you, her mother lost about 30 pounds. And just recently, she went to the doctor, she gained about 12 more, and still gaining, using the natural remedies. A lot of these medications, I am totally against medication, because it's like a license to distribute drugs. And any doctor will tell you medication does not heal you, it helps a bit. It can't cure you. It cannot. And a lot of times we get so hooked on the belief that the person in the white coat knows what they're saying, that we take the drug and we believe it will help us, and it begins to work because you believe it. But it can also give you a sugar pill, and you believe it and you get healed too, because the mind is powerful. So I'm not saying meds, don't take a med. Don't get me wrong, take your meds. I don't take meds. In fact, in 2015, I was involved in an accident. I was hit from behind. I have 4 discs out, 1 herniated, 3 bulging. Deep tissue damage, nerve damage. Went to the hospital. They gave me what's the thing called? Morphine. And it was like Kool-Aid. They didn't do me anything. They had to actually knock me out with some drop him to sleep. When I got up, the pain was still there. They gave me to go with more trust. I said, Lord, see this? I know this can help, but I need to trust you. Began to use natural remedies, oils, and pray and have faith and trust God. and the pain begins to subside. The pain comes back. But what I'm saying is, if you follow New Start, nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, and trust in God, a lot of our sicknesses can begin to be reversed. And if we plant our own foods, we know what we are eating, we will see a marked difference. That's just me.
Can I respond to the question about the children? How do you know what's going on? One of the things I look at as a clinician when I start working with a family, I have to visit the home. I have to see the family dynamics, because a child can exhibit certain behaviors that could be categorized as a mental disorder when this is merely a reflection of what's going on in the home. For instance, if the child is being verbally abused or is given poor nutrition, he's going to respond a different way than a child who isn't. So one of the ways that we have to determine whether or not a child needs medication, we can't just go on what happens when that child comes to my office. I don't know if any of you have read the book called A Boy Called It. Very, very painful book to read. Took me about 3 days, and it's only that thick. But it's a serious story about child abuse in the worst type of case it has ever been. But the child was being considered a bad child at school, labeled as bad and incurable and responsible for stealing food and doing everything. Well, it turns out in the home, the child was being deprived food. The child was being mistreated so horribly that you wouldn't even imagine a mother could do this. So I say that to say, before we label a child, even in the home, as a bad child, you have to make sure you look at the family dynamics to see what's going on. Therefore, in my practice, we always go to the home. And a parent who won't let me come to their home, I can't work with that family. So it's important to go to that home and see what that child has to go to when he gets in that, behind those doors.
Okay, I have a question, and my question gives.
Well, can we hold on just a second, because he had a two-part question that didn't get answered. And you asked about how do you get your friend back in the workplace?
Yeah, how do you help that person re-enter the workforce after they've been let go because of their mental health issues?
Okay, so the first question would be, what would make you want to get them back into the workforce when they were released because of that? Now, don't get me wrong, when I asked this question, notice I said what? I'm not saying why. Now, this is something that folks can practice on with their kids. I never ask anybody why, because they're going to defend that position. When I say what, now you're going to give me reasons or whatever. So I'm trying to find out what would make you want to get them back into the workforce if they've already been let go because of mental health issues. Is it something they're wanting to do? Is it something you're wanting to do? Somebody else?
It's something she wants to do. She wants to get back into the workforce.
Okay. When she was released, did she ever see anybody?
Yes, she's gone through the inpatient, and now she's working through outpatient therapy to get kind of past this issue.
Okay, and so what did that therapist recommend? Because that's probably where you would start. If the therapist recommended, if anytime you go see anybody, there should be a treatment plan that's created, okay? That's the blueprint for treatment, your treatment plan, okay, for wellness or whatever. And so in that situation, you can go back and ask your friend, hey, did you talk to your therapist about getting back into the workforce? And so if they hadn't, I would recommend they either go back to that therapist, because there's probably, you know, depending on how many sessions they had, there's some history there. And then that therapist can say, okay, the goal is, what is our goal here in therapy? Is it to get you back into the workplace, or is it just to, you know, stabilize you? So at that point, I would send them back there, or maybe a different therapist, and start working on the goal of getting back into the workplace. Now, here's the situation. If they got released from work due to like dangerous, you know, behavior or whatever, then that person probably is not going to be able to get, you know, another job. So that's where I would start. I don't know if anybody agrees with that or disagrees on the panel, or.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
I'm a counselor. I'm not a prescriber of medication. However, I've seen the benefits of persons with disorders such as schizophrenia. So I definitely recognize and fully appreciate that diet, exercise, all of those things can be contributing factors to recovery and resiliency. However, sometimes there is an absolute need for medication in order for the person to come back to reality, because in essence with schizophrenia, a psychotic break means that they've lost touch with reality. They may be experiencing hallucinations where they may hear things that we don't hear, see things that we don't see, even smell or taste or feel things, and it causes them to exhibit bizarre behavior. And with anybody, if we're sitting next to someone and they're behaving in ways that we would consider bizarre and not socially appropriate, where we might begin to feel alarmed, even if that person did nothing threatening as it relates to their behavior. However, with counseling, if a person is actively in a psychotic episode, there's nothing that we can do, literally, in psychotherapy. Reason being, because they've lost touch with reality. Therefore, they need to become stabilized, and the most likely method for doing that is a psychotropic medication, so that they can regain their sense of reality, so that they can then engage and fully participate in their own treatment and care. So I would say if a person is interested in regaining, re-entering the workforce, it would have to be after a sustained period of stabilization.
Thank you.
Are you clear? Good. Are there any more questions?
I have a question. Oh,
Go ahead.
Okay, I know several people who will snap in a minute, not in the church, but I would say they need Jesus, but other people who be around them and know them say that they would say they're just bipolar. So what's the behavior of bipolar? Anyone know what kind of behavior that is?
Okay, bipolar, again, is a mood disorder, and it affects moods and emotions, okay? There's different, let's see what happens. It's like, I wish I had a dry erase board where I could show you, but there's like, mania, manic behavior, and then there's depression. So, in other words, just look at my hand and say, this is normal, okay? Lower would be depression, manic would be higher. So you got somebody who's bipolar, and that's kind of like the new catchphrase. Like years ago, it was everybody ADHD. So you're riding on that thing, and then somebody goes into this deep depression, okay? It's deep depression, and when they're down in that area, it's like you are the worst person, and I'm just trying to put it in layman's terms because there's a whole lot associated with it, but you're the worst person. They hate you. I can't stand you. They're suicidal. There's risky behavior, and taking drugs, sex, without protection, whatever, anybody you meet. And then when they come back on that high, that manic, it's like happy all the time. Wasn't it a song back in the day? Yeah. In right, out right, down right, up right, happy all the time? Yeah. We were talking about bipolar behavior. And so when they're on that manic, you're the best person, they love you, you're the best thing since sliced bread, and so you go in from mania to depression to mania, and when you get into, that manic episode, there's like 3 or more, criteria that have to be met before they can be, diagnosed as bipolar. And then, with their meds, they're kind of like, stable in between or whatever, and they back on that. But if they've decompensated, it's down and it's up. It's just basically mood swings. And that's basically how you can describe, bipolar behavior. It's a mood disorder like schizophrenia, but schizophrenia is also like a brain disorder, because you asked that before. Brain disorder, which generally they don't know where it comes from, but what scientists try to say is that it's either, a genetic predisposition or vulnerability and environmental things that have happened in somebody's past. So when we talk about, PTSD, and things like that, things that have happened that maybe nobody knows about but you and the person or whatever, and, all of that play a role.
And can I add a little bit to the bipolar, on the bipolar, on the mania side, also some characteristics that you might see is a person going overboard on certain aspects of their lives. They might be enthusiastically anxious about doing certain things or making certain decisions. They may shop excessively without taking responsibility or realizing they're depleting their funds in the wrong way. They may do things on a high, so to speak, that you wouldn't normally see them do. And so I think one of those characteristics also is what you want to look out for. If somebody is being careless and reckless on extreme high, now that's not the balance level they would be. So the poles we're looking about, you're either too low or too high, and that's where the trouble is. But if you're level out, you're okay. But either one of those, the lower one or the higher one, they're doing something irresponsible, irrational, and not normal behavior for them.
Another word to describe that is impulsive. A lot of times during mania episodes, people can go without sleep for extended periods of time. They engage in all those risky type behaviors, the impulsivity. They may exhibit what we call pressured speech, which is a whole lot of talking without many breaks in between. You like people say, I can't get a word in edgewise. So some of those things might be present.
Not eating. The question I wanted to ask, back to ADHD, doctor. I deal with a lot of that too, but in our school system, not talking about the public school system, but the Adventist church school system, I've had a lot of friends who've had children, which they say, well, they're slow. They can't understand this, or they don't understand that. It's not that they cannot understand. The teachers, or in the Adventist realm, I am, it's coming. They just don't want to recognize. They're not equipped. So the parent they don't want to take their children out of the Adventist school, but they have to, because the child is not getting help. In the school system, they do. In your public school system, they will go, once the child is diagnosed as being ADHD, they will get a counselor. The counselor will work with the child. Then they will have a plan, which is called a 504 plan. The 504 plan lets the teacher, lets the counselor know what the child is capable of doing. If the child is being rushed in their testing, they don't have to sit aside from the other students, but they're able to take their tests at their own pace. I want to know, why is it that in the Adventist schools that there's nothing there for the ADHD child?
Well, I'm going to speak to that, and I'm not an educator, only because this is it. One of the things, it's not all Adventist schools are like that. No. It's not all. It just takes the foresight of the leadership to say we need to implement this. And the reason I am a product of Pine Forge Academy, and I'm very proud to say that. My husband is a product of Shenandoah Valley Academy, and he might be proud to say that. But the thing, and I'm gonna say that one because I mess with them all the time about that, but the reality was when our children were in high school and we would go up there to visit, Pine Forge at that time did not offer things like that. Shenandoah Valley was light years ahead of us. They offered all of that. They offered testing for children that were slower, that did not, they offered every aspect that you just mentioned. And that's Adventist school system, both, you know, why are they not equal? So it just depends on the school and the curriculum that's around and, you know, what they fall under, because I couldn't figure out for the life of me why, when they both fall under Adventism, did they not offer the exact same thing?
And I'm going to answer that question. I'm on the North American Division Disability Committee, and the Education Department was on there because we've been discussing this for years about how do you deal with children with special needs that have learning disabilities. The Education Department, every 5 years, they have an NAD Education Conference, and every time they have the NAD Education Conference, all the special needs teachers and paraprofessionals get together, and that has always been a discussion, is how we can better equip our schools to handle children that have learning disabilities, because everybody doesn't learn the same way. Right. There are different learning styles. And the answer that we get is that we're not adequately equipped, we're not adequately trained, we don't have enough funding, we don't have enough processing, and all these other things. And there always seems to be a lot of excuses, but prayerfully, I'm going to work towards, and I need your help, in helping us change that, because there is information out there. To give you an example, there was a philanthropy group in Washington, D.C. One year they said public education schools are not giving children with special needs the attention that they need. Let's go to a private school. And they gave the private schools a challenge to come up with a plan and submit it, and they would provide funding for that school. DuPont Park, Seventh-day Adventist Church, went in and applied for that, and they won. The first year, they had 18 children with special needs. That philanthropy group gave them $400,000 to help them with children with special needs. Those children were going to an Adventist school system, and when they needed to go to classes for the additional training, they actually had transportation that would pick them up from the Adventist setting, take them over to the other place for their class, and bring them back. But that ended, and then it's kind of folded along the way.
Well, you know, Rosemary, I think you kind of answered the question, is sometimes we have to step outside of us to get things done. We have to go and step into mainstream and see what is going on, and don't just limit it to us. I think we have a great program. I'm a product of Christian education, but I do believe that there are many things out there that the Lord wants us to understand, to matriculate with, to get a better understanding and what we can bring home.
And I will tell you this, that North American Division, they did put together a manual called the REACH Manual, which is supposed to help with children with special needs, but it is not extensive enough. We have a lot of children coming into our schools now that have all different types of learning disabilities. I did some studies, and I did a workshop on the ADHD, and also found out that exposure to lead, paint, and chemicals. We don't think about these different types of chemicals and things that, you know, I agree that there are some foods. I agree that the medical profession says 70% of the disorders are caused from our diets. I agree with that. But we neglect the fact that there are non-chemicals that are banned in other countries that come over into this U.S. that are coming into our household products. For instance, ladies, Bath and Body Works, Japanese cherry blossom has toxins in it. Men, Old Spice has toxic chemicals in it. All of these things have toxic chemicals. The Vaseline you put in your body, the toothpaste
My father loves Old
brush your
Spice,
teeth with.
so I take offense to that.
I'm
My
sorry,
mother likes
man, I'm
Japanese
sorry.
hair by
Courtesy toxic.
I know. But I'm just saying, that we are overlooking the chemical factors. We're overlooking the fact that now you've got GM in food. Look at now they're talking about the brown rice is really not brown rice.
That's right.
It may be plastic coming from China. Really?
That's why it's so chewy.
I have a question.
Okay, you got me on my
I
soapbox.
think we're veering off a topic here, so let's try to stick
But
with the
get-
topic so we can get through this.
But getting back to special needs, you know, with the children, that is something that we are addressing in our schools, and it is something that we do need to address and continue to addressing, is how do we equip our schools? Because we say that we're supposed to be the head and not the tail, and honestly, I will tell you, from where I sit, we are the tail. And I will tell you this, the Lord has blessed me with the disability ministries. I had to go outside of the Seventh-day Adventist Church to find resources. I send my coordinators every month materials. I send the mental health professionals. They know I'm always sending. I just loaded them up with a whole bunch of stuff. But everything that I send out does not have a Seventh-day Adventist anything on it. We are the tail. We're in the tail.
I have a question. I'm familiar with Pine Forge, but
Yes.
Shenandoah Valley.
Shenandoah Valley is in Virginia.
Okay.
And I think it's under Potomac, Kat?
Okay,
It's
so
under
then
Potomac.
that would be in the other conference.
Our
Okay,
cousins
so that
conference, and the
answers.
cousins. But the thing is,
No, but I'm not shooting that down.
but
I'm
they're
just
still
saying.
in our same union.
I hear you. However, that answers a whole lot. We, by and large, again, I think are a lot in denial. Not only that, but I have a saying, if it's important to you, you'll get it done.
Right.
Apparently it's not important because I have offered my services to Adventist schools to be a counselor in the school. The first thing you hear is, we don't have money. Did I ask for money?
Right.
Do I need to get paid? Of course I do. However, there's a lot of ways you can structure this
That's right.
to where I was planning to go to every school one time a week. The schools pull together and say, hey, how much do we have so we can get this counselor over here on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, whoever. That's what I was planning. So it's not that important because our kids don't have mental health issues.
Terry, I think it's a gradual process that it's just, we all need to think differently, so I don't think it's just you. Just mental health, period, whether it's dementia or ADHD, whatever it is, we have to embrace that in our church, and I think this is the start of that. I mean, we're having a discussion here, so I think it's really, really good, but I think that instead of having fun runs and breakfast Mondays, we need to start really having programs to educate each other on things that are relevant, things that are going on in the churches, in the homes, things that are happening today that we all need help with. But we're still in the keep it under the covers mode. So it's we're peeling it back little by little, but we're just not there.
We're going to take two more questions. We have two back here. We have one here, and we have a young lady here. And after that, we're going to do a wrap-up. Okay?
Hi there. A few questions. I am a counselor. I'm a school counselor. I would love to have you, Dr. West. I would love to have you out of school. If you want to come out, you are probably a person. I have a cheerleader voice. That's why I hate to get on this thing. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Okay, I bet you can hear me now, right? Okay, I'm not out in the field, but I know you can hear me. Okay, I do have a couple questions. Alzheimer, and you were mentioning diet and eggs, and of course Dr. Oz has things on the television, do this, do that, blase, blase. I don't go for all that. Is there a diet? My mother's 86 now, so is there a diet that a person can kind of follow to help prevent such things? Dementia, not just Alzheimer, but dementia, and I do believe in the 8 laws of, 8 laws of life? Health, life, health. I do believe in that. Tests, are there tests a person can take in the beginning? And does family history play a part? So those are 3 pieces to that. And then I have another piece because I've been waiting 20 minutes. I'm a counselor. I have another piece.
Let it out.
Okay, so that's about that. Tests, diet, and family history. I told you you could come to our school should you so desire. And I had one more piece. I'm dealing with a few people who are supposedly they were schizophrenic. One young lady in particular, schizophrenic, was taking 4 or 5 meds. I don't know about your thoughts on 4 or 5 meds, but to me, I don't know how I can tell what your problem is with 4 or 5 meds, because they began to react. The girl's only about 17. She's been going through episodes for years. Years. Now she's taking nothing. She's doing much better. Why? Prayer, talking to the family, getting mom this way, and then their insurance ran out. But she's doing much better. Face, body going back to normal. She can have a conversation. But what I'm concerned with is that she gets ready to go on her own because she's nowhere near what one would call normal. I need to give her some, of course I can pray for her through life. And we have conversations where this young lady will kind of read her Bible a little bit more now. I've even told her to sleep with the Bible with you. You know, if something goes on, read it. What can I tell her? Give her some nuggets for life, because this may be something she battles with for life. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm going to start with Alzheimer's, and then I'm going to let that pass. For my mother, when she first got diagnosed, I took her to a place in Richmond, Virginia called PACE. PACE was a program that was started by physicians going over to Asia, and in Asia they didn't have nursing homes at all. And they wanted to study what do they do there that they have no nursing homes. What the doctor did there, she felt they wanted to take my mother off as much medicine as humanly possible. My mother was struggling with depression. After my father's death, you tell her, Mom, you need grief counseling. You may need something. You're not sleeping. You know, her answer was the good old Adventist answer, as long as I got King Jesus. Yes, ma'am, that's true, but you need to sleep. And so you need to rest and let your body rest. My mother's diabetic. Since she has lived with my husband and I, and we moved her here, and you know, you've met my mother, she has gotten off almost all of her medicines. Her diabetic medicine has stopped. I mean, she's at the very minimal of anything. I try to feed my mother as healthy as I know how. Natural, fruits, you know, very little stuff. She doesn't drink soda. We try to do the laws we were taught growing up. I just went back to basics, back to Eden. That's the best that I could tell you. We even have to govern when my sisters visit to tell them, don't you give her that. Don't you give her, because they think that, you know, we're going to love her by giving her peach cobbler. Please stop. Just stop it. You know, we've got her where her A1C is amazing. I mean, it's just one of those things. I went back to what the word says as far as health. I've seen those things on Dr. Oz. I love my mother-in-law. She thinks Dr. Oz is talking straight to her. I said, ma'am, he's not your doctor. He doesn't know you. So please stop. But yeah, we have to tell her that sometimes. But the thing is, anything natural, anything healthy, anything like that, and what we use in the Alzheimer's Association, if it is good for your heart, it is good for your brain. Think about it, exercise and water and those things. That is the guideline that I would go by for that. And
we do the same thing, not even knowing, you know, what medical professionals say.
Right.
We do the exact same things, a routine, going outside, fresh air. Actually, my father just comes alive if you take him outside. So if he's in the house, he hasn't been talking, he's acting a little, you know, out of it, take him outside. The sun changes him immediately.
I can give you a phone number. There's a natural doctor, naturopathic doctor called Dr. Joel Wallach. He's world renowned, and he's not a Seventh Adventist, but he has written about us and about our original diet, and if we had stuck with it, where we would be right now as Seventh Adventists. And he recommends, for one gentleman, he recommended about 18 eggs a day. Now, medical doctors say that 4 eggs a week is sufficient. That's too much, but most of them own nursing homes. Most nursing homes are owned by medical doctors, so they treat you for a certain amount of years and they put you in their nursing home until you die. They know that cholesterol, there's nothing like bad cholesterol. Your body needs cholesterol. Your brain needs cholesterol. So a certain number of eggs, depending on the case, per day, because they myelin in the brain, they're made of cholesterol. So any foods that produce more cholesterol, you got to attack it. So see me after, we'll give you the number for the doctor. You can call him and give him a height or weight, because in the medical field, they just give you meds. They'll give me the same meds they'll give to this petite person over there. In the animal world, he was also a vet. In the animal world, they give you based on body size and on your weight to deal with it. So I'll give you the number afterwards, and you can talk with him.
Hi. We've had a great discussion today and great sermon today. My question is this: what now? All of us who are here today are obviously interested in mental health, either because we deal with it, our family member, or we just see it in the news and we're interested about it. Now what do we do as a church? I myself have gone to another church and have seen their programs: Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Depression Bipolar Support Alliance, Divorce Recovery, anyways, any number of things that this Baptist church here in our city offers. What can we do as a Seventh-day Adventist church so our people, me, does not feel the stigma and that we are accepted, but also that we can reach out to know what to do or feel accepted. What now?
Ask your question.
So let's not elongate this, but quick synopsis, because that's an excellent question.
That was perfect.
That's a wrap up there.
All right, answer the question, y'all.
We know that we could stay here for another 2 hours and still don't exhaust everything that we need to ask. I just want to thank everybody for coming out, and that's a very good question. Like, what's her name? Alice in Wonderland. Where do we go from here? That's a good question.
Okay.
I'll tell you one thing before Rosemary starts. I just want to say, resources. We need to know where they are and how to share them. And we need to, I didn't know that these professionals were in our church. All
we
of
have a
these
lot more.
individuals.
We have a whole lot more.
You know, so we have a lot of resources that we need to share among each other, and we need to be willing to come together as a group and start something. You know, the guy who did AAA, because AAA is this car service, the Alcoholic Anonymous, he started that because he had that passion, because he was healed through that process. So what we need to do now, after we've heard all this information here now and have some kind of awareness, is to go ahead and start something and take it forward.
Dr. Ruff, I'm sorry, could I just make this one comment? It's going to be
Yes.
short, I promise you. But I know I observed something here today that's characteristics of the Black Adventist Church. Your children come last. I had your children back there for about 30 minutes, and they asked some of the most profound questions. Nobody wanted to know what the children learned or what they talked about. In this forum, children are dealing with some of the same illnesses that adults are dealing with, but nobody gave an opportunity for them to ask a question. Some of the questions these young people asked were amazing for their age, and I only had 5 little girls in there, and I think the oldest might have been 10. But it seemed to be characteristic of our churches to put our children last, not because you're trying to, but even in your worship service, you give them 7 minutes for children's story. And I would like to see a forum like this where we include them and not exclude them. We make them a part of this. We've talked about mental illness, but how many of your children are suffering from depression right now? How many of your children could have learned something today about dealing with that depression? How many of your children know of a little peer at school who is being abused? And how many of your children know of a child who's going to try to take his life? That's what we and the kids talked about. That's what amazed me about what they said. And you all didn't get a benefit from that because they weren't really asked to share. So I just want to encourage you, when we do something like that, please engage your children. They have big questions. They're little children, but they have big questions. I guarantee you, some of their questions would have amazed some of you. Thank you.
Okay. Can I take priority here? Yep. Joanne, I want you to tell me one question that they asked, and what was the answer?
One of the questions they asked.
What was the question that impressed you the most that they asked, and what was your answer?
the one question they asked was, what does brain damage do to you? They want to know, if somebody that's got brain damage, how does that affect how they are? Is that making them retarded? So apparently this child had been introduced to some of this information. So we discussed how brain damage can occur, various ways. I did it in a childlike form, but I wanted them to understand it could come by different ways. Sometimes when the doctor is birthing you, the biceps they're pulling you out can cause your head to be damaged. That can cause brain damage. Sometimes somebody shakes a baby real hard, like little Joey who was in there with us. We demonstrated. If somebody shakes her real hard in a mean, angry way, her or a younger baby can cause brain damage. Different ways brain damage. Sometimes something children eat can cause brain damage. But one of the most profound questions with much concern that one of the young ladies asked was, I got somebody who smokes and I love them, but I'm afraid to tell them to stop smoking because they'll get mad. Somebody in her family, she says, smokes, and she was afraid to tell them. So she asked me, what can smoking do to you? And we discussed the way smoking can harm you. And another question was, can I get sick being around somebody who smokes? These are the things your children are asking. And obviously, of course she can. Secondhand smoke does as much damage as firsthand smoke. So that's just a couple examples.
Okay, and I apologize because we were trying to set up the format for this afternoon. But from here on out, we will definitely include the children. Where do we go from here? I'm going to put that question back on you for a minute. And I'll put this on Leonora. What does Decatur Seventh-day Adventist Church want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to see happen? Yes, let's start off.
So there is something called peer facilitators, facilitation, peer counseling, where people who have a diagnosed mental illness also relate to others, because it's kind of like you're coming from a peer perspective as opposed to I'm up here, you're down there. So I would love to see something in that realm where we empower people who have diagnosed mental illnesses as opposed to, oh, let's help them. Well, guess what? I'm one of them, and I'm a professional. You know what I'm saying? So if we had something like that, also if we offered groups, well-known groups, like I mentioned before, the groups I mentioned before, to just take the stigma out of it, and just more sermons like this morning, as well as what Pastor Whitaker preached a few Sabbaths ago, saying that AA, you know, we all can use those steps in our everyday lives. You know, more of that rhetoric, because literally we all deal with this every day. Someone said we're all on the spectrum. I believe it's true.
Here's what I would like to see happen. Here's what I encourage all of our churches to do. Today was mental health emphasis specifically for all of our churches in South Atlantic Conference. My kudos off to, where's Pastor Whitaker? My kudos off to Pastor Whitaker and Pastor Nixon, because in January I was at the pastors' in-service meeting telling them, okay, y'all know me, mental health emphasis Sabbath. I gave litanies, bulletin inserts, PowerPoint presentations, fact sheet handouts, 10 steps to start a mental health ministry in your church. That's the beginning, to get a group together and say, who are the mental health professionals in our church? How can we have something started? To give you an idea what the church can do, one of my coordinators in North Carolina is a mental health professional. She went to a Baptist church. They had actually started a small clinic on Sundays because they had so many LPCs and mental health professionals working in their church that on Sunday mornings they offered between 2 to 3 free sessions for their church members. Anything outside of that was referred. Not only that, they started a support group for people with mental illness. I have encouraged our church leaders to start support groups. Let me say this. A support group is not a Bible study. Let me say this again. I know we're big on Bible studies. Yes, I am too. But a support group is not a Bible study. A support group is a means for people that have like conditions to come together to find resources and to uplift and encourage each other. You have the space to do it downstairs in your church. When I was first diagnosed with lupus and I was going through my depressive state, I started going to a lupus support group. That helped me get through. And I went to the support group was in a Lutheran church. So you know what I was doing when I passed through the hallway of the Lutheran church? Because the Lutheran church was smart enough to have literature out on the table as we passed by. I didn't know they believed that. I was picking up stuff. And then they said I had that brain aha moment. Why aren't we doing that in our churches? Offering support groups for people that have arthritis, for people that have cancer, for people that have heart disease, because most of our churches can at least host a support group. And you know what you would have down there? Vibrant Life, Message Magazine, Steps to Christ. So my suggestion is to look over the 10 steps of how you can start a mental health ministry in the Decatur Church. Look at how you can start a support group in your church for people that have, and if you don't find enough people that want to do the mental health, then you can do something in terms of all disabilities, physical disabilities, because once again, I still go to a lupus support group because guess what? And I don't mean to be ugly when I say that, but they understand me. And they don't judge me. When I tell them I'm tired and I couldn't feel like getting up out of bed, girl, me too. And when I can now say that I used to take 15 pills a day and now I'm only on 3. So support groups can be a ministry too. But a support group and doing things like this, I am so grateful to the Decatur Church for starting this. This will be a continuation. Let me tell you why you need to continue this. July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. October, the second week in October, is Mental Illness Awareness Week. I have already spoken to Belinda and Shelley about us doing what's called Memory Sabbath to bring awareness about dementia and Alzheimer's to all of our churches and to have literature and information available for that. We will continue emphasis in the churches as they are doing it. We have other churches in South Carolina and North Carolina that I know that are repeating what's happening here today. So throughout the conference, we're trying to raise the awareness. But I need your help too. If you are not a member of Decatur and you're a member of a different church, you need to conduct the same seminar at your church. Contact me and I will give you the names, the contacts, the resources, everything that you need to continue the awareness. Because after all, a mind is a terrible thing to waste.
May I say one thing before we close? Every church, at least, well, let me talk about the Adventist church, has a health and temperance leader and disabilities. And in the same way, I think the elders are trained at the conference office, or at least supposed to be trained, how to be elders. Every area of the church, every department should be a ministry or ministry-minded. And if that's the case, that will answer the question of the young lady, because the disabilities isn't temperance. Listen, what areas can we form ministries in? And that by itself, like you said before, can start a ministry and probably lead to Bible study down the road. But we are not using the God-given brain that God gave us. We're not respecting the church members who are skilled in mental health in different areas. So when we go to the nominating committee, we put our friends or somebody who has a PhD in history to be in charge of mental health. We're not using the gifting that God says in the Bible each person has, and each department should be a ministry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I need your help. I am so excited about this, and I will tell you, the Lord placed on my heart 2 years ago for us to do a mental health conference, and I kept putting it off and kept putting it off. This year, August 25th through the 27th, the flyers are on the table. At the campground, we are going to have a mental health conference. I am mental health. Do you see me? That is our title and that is our frame. We have several speakers that are going to be there. Shelley is one, Dr. Parks was another that will be our presenters for that weekend. You can go on AdventSource and register for the event, and then you can call the conference office and talk to Marlene about housing, and that's because that's a separate fee and everything, but please support the mental health. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, so can everybody please stand? And we want to thank you so much for coming out. This information here really does need to go further, but it's a start. And we want to thank you for coming to help us through this awareness session, that now we can start something for real. Can we kind of gather around here? I would like all of us to just gather around here and hold hands, because it only takes a spark. And the spark was started today. So it only takes one spark. I want to thank all of you for coming. But it's like a fireplace. You put the wood in the fire, and you light it, and you have a good blaze. But then you start taking out one piece of log at a time. And you take out that log and you put it aside, and soon it dies. And then your blaze is reduced dramatically. But as you continue to take out each log, it dies. And then your blaze diminishes even further. So we are like the fireplace right now. And that's how our community is. We all need each other to keep the blaze going. And if someone falls out, then the blaze gets less. You know, they say that the geese, they fly in a V formation, and when the leader at the front is tired, it doesn't talk, it just falls back, and somebody else takes its place. And if one of them gets shot or is hurt, one other one go with them and stay with them until they either die or recover. So unless we can have that kind of interactivity going on and that connection going on, then I don't know, we really won't go any further than here. But I just wanted to say that to say we really do need each other, because we have children, grandchildren, grandparents are raising grandchildren, it's caregivers are alone. You know, we just need to connect. There are lots of resources, but we need to connect to make it happen. So if we are all, and I think we are, passionate about having the continuity of this, and I think we have the dedication and the commitment to make it happen. It only takes one spark, and there are many sparks represented here today. So are you with us? Are you with me when I say we need all these sparks to make a big blaze? Can we do it? Yes, we can. I want to thank God for this. Let's sing It Only Takes a Spark, and then we have a prayer.
With the theme of the bird that Dr. Ruff talked about, I want us to think about two birds. Think about the bird that sticks its head in the sand and thinks that everything is all right. And what was the name of that bird? Ostrich. The ostrich. And think about another bird that shows its feathers and shows everything that it has. What's the name of that bird? The peacock. So think about the ostrich and the peacock. And what we started here today, before we started this, we were like the ostrich. Let us go out and be a peacock and show what we've learned and what we've heard here this evening. Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, we are truly grateful, O God, that you are our God. And Father, we ask of you this evening, Lord, to bless us tremendously as we know you would. Father, what we've heard here, what we have experienced here, some questions that were answered, others, Lord Father, that we are yet to be answered, Lord God. May we continue delving into this topic. And as much as possible, the things that we have learned, that we will go out and share it and spread it with others. Father God, we will stop condemning, stop making arbitrary diagnosis in our own layman terms. But now that we have some resources, we would call upon those who have studied this craft, those who know, those who have the experience, who have seen certain things, Lord. And we ask, oh God, that knowing that mental health is all around us, in our homes, our families, in our communities, our neighborhoods, we ask, oh Lord God, that we will be an army of one, deciding that we will go forth and do something about it. We ask your blessings, Lord, as we go. Be with each one of us. Grant us safety as we travel. Direct our path. And we pray for your blessings upon us in this coming week. In Jesus' name we ask it. Amen.
I do have some information I'll leave out front for the parents as well as the children.
There are some resources on the table outside of websites and different places where you can go. And also, if you're from another church and I don't have your